Would you read to us now?
Sure. I'm going to read from a chapter called University of Doubt. Literacy-based education assumes that people are the same. It presumes that each human being can and must be literate. Just as the goal of industry was to turn out standardized products, education assumes the same tasks through the mold of literacy. Diplomas and certificates testify how like the mold the product is. The question of why we should expect uniform cognitive structures covering the literate use of language or numbers, but not the use of sounds, of colors, of shapes and volumes, is never raised. Tremendous effort is made to help individuals who simply cannot execute the sequentiality of writing or the meaning of successive numbers. Nothing similar is done to address cognitive characteristics of persons who don't understand images, who don't understand sounds. In order to respond to the needs of the pragmatics of high efficiency of our time, leading to the civilization of many literacies, education needs, first of all, to rediscover the individual, to rediscover his or her cognitive characteristics. I use the word rediscover, having in mind incipient forms of education and training which were more on a one-to-one or one-to-few basis. Education needs also to reconsider its expectation of a universal common denominator based on the industrial model of standardization, rather than taming and sanitizing the minds of students. Education has to acknowledge differences in aptitudes, in interests. It also has to stimulate these differences. Every known form of energy is the expression of difference and not the result of leveling. During this process of reevaluation, the goals of education will have to be redefined. Methods of education need to be rethought, and content need really to be reassessed. A new philosophy, embodied in a dynamic notion of education, has to crystallize as we work towards educational alternatives that integrate the visual, the kinetic, the oral, and the synesthetic. In the spirit of the pragmatic context, education ought to become an environment for interaction and discovery, not for repeating truths that belong to older times. Time taken with reiterations of the past deserves to be committed to inferences for the present and, to the extent possible, for the future. Some of the suggestions to be made in the coming lines might sound utopian or have a ring of technobabble. Their purpose is to present possibilities, not to conjure up miraculous solutions. The path from present to future is the path of human practical experiences of self-constitution. To achieve goals corresponding to requirements and expectations of the civilization of no dominant literacy, education needs to give up the reductionist perspective that has marked it since generalized education became the norm. Education has to recognize its students as the individuals they are, not as some abstract or theoretic entity, not as entities in statistics. Basic education should be centered around the major forms of expression and communication: language, the visual, the oral, the kinetic, the symbolic. Difference among these systems need to be explored as students familiarize themselves with each of them, as well as with their combinations. Concrete forms of acculturation should be geared towards using these elements, not dispensing instructions and assigning exercises. Most important, students will have to share their experience among themselves. There will be no right or wrong, and there cannot be right or wrong in education. Fundamental to the educational endeavor is the process of inquiry, to be expressed through the program for further investigations in which the students are involved. These programs require many languages: the literate inquiry, mathematics, chemistry, computation, but also dancing and singing. By virtue of the fact that people from different backgrounds enter the process, they bear the experience of their respective languages. Relevance to the problem at hand will justify one approach or another without forcing one approach upon the others. Frequently, the wheel will be reinvented. Other times, new wheels will emerge as contributions of authentic ingenuity and inventiveness. In their interaction, those involved in the process sharing the experience through which they constitute themselves at many levels. Education has to become a living process.
Of more forms of literacy.
That's right.
Thank you, Dr. Nadin.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next week, we'll have Maria Munoz Blanco, who is the new head of the Dallas Office of Cultural Affairs. Pardon me. Until then, I hope you find time to enjoy your own freedom to read.